contemplating this for a long time, watching everybody else go before her. But I just want to thank you guys for being here, and real quickly, just an introduction of who you are and what your connection to WISE is would be great. John?
I'll start with John Sloan. I'm the computer lab tech lab supervisor for the campus. I was a WISE mentor several years ago. It's my third or fourth evaluation.
Thank you, John.
I'm Mary Ellen. My daughter initially was another family of the WISE program, and I chose yours because I'm a student nurse as well.
Awesome. I'm Gigi Oxford. I'm also in WISE this year, so I evaluated this presentation.
My name is Yosh Neugebauer, and I'm the co-president with Joan Kike for EFO, and WISE is one of the programs that EFO has the opportunity to fund.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'm Sarah Cadet. I teach the physiology and AP biology classes here at school, and I guess I've been evaluating for the last 8 or 9 years.
If Maddie does roll in, she's a junior who is planning to take WISE next year, so hopefully she will be able to see this presentation through. And I'm just pulling up WISE for a while, and I'm excited to hear what Emily has to say. So a couple things. You've had an opportunity to see Emily's blog. A lot of kids have done that route this year, so hopefully that was convenient and easy to use. When she's finished with her presentation today, we're hoping to hear some things that maybe weren't necessarily in the blog, or have some things elucidated, or kind of fill in some gaps. So you have 2 sheets in front of you. You have that yellow sheet where you can make notes on the things she's saying. To be honest, I'm less concerned with the checks and check places you put in, and more concerned with what things you might want to write down that you want to engage her in as far as questions or comments after she's finished. And then the other sheet is that journal rubric, which is probably a little too dense to look at now, but your thoughts on the journal, hopefully you've got some notes there and some things that you can record to help talk to that portion of her work. When Emily's done in a half hour or so, we'll take some questions from everyone, including family and friends back there that may want to ask her about things. And then when that's finished, we'll ask those family and friends to depart for about 15-20 minutes, and you guys will get a chance to put your notes together and figure out how you want to share your thoughts with Emily. And what's really important is to speak to 3 things. The journal, where really a vast majority of the work goes. It's hard to put everything in a 25-30-minute presentation, so the journal is where a lot of the thinking and the process went, so we want to make sure to honor that thinking that she's done by responding to the writing that was there. Then, of course, what you just heard, the presentation, and then your just thoughts overall on the experience and what you think Emily has gone through there. Emily will just be listening at that point. It's not really a conversation so much. You want to ask your questions earlier on. When the evaluation is over, you're going to send all your paperwork over to Mr. Gade, who's been working as a mentor with Emily all along, and he can share those things, those pieces of writing and that evaluation in a written form with Emily later. Kind of hard to digest everything after you just read it. So I recommend you do that maybe 24, 48 hours or something like that. One quick reminder to turn off any devices that might beep or buzz or saying what plays the song. And with that, I'll turn things over to Ms. Sloan.
All right. I am Emily Sloan, as you guys probably all know, and I chose to do my WISE project on volunteering in the emergency department at Children's Hospital of Oakland. I chose to volunteer at a hospital because my original desires before this whole experience were to become a surgeon. I was in Mr. Gay's physio class, and I'm currently in physio class, and I loved physio. And we would watch a lot of surgeries, and I really, really loved watching the surgeries, and I thought it would be a really good fit for me. So I really wanted to be a surgeon, and I chose to volunteer in a hospital because I really wanted to get familiar with the hospital environment. All right, so why Children's Hospital of Oakland out of all the hospitals I could have chosen? Well, first of all, I was already volunteering at Children's Hospital of Oakland. I was doing paperwork for the employee health department. That wasn't exactly the most fun job. I was just filing papers for vaccines that employees were getting for the employee health department. So I decided to broaden my horizons a little bit and transferred to the emergency department. And that was, I mean, it was a really great choice because the volunteer coordinator, her name is Susan Martinez, she was really big help. She told me that that was the most hands-on department, and I didn't have to be 18 yet, because I was still 17 when I was starting, to volunteer in the emergency room. So that was a big, big decision. Also, another reason why I decided Children's Hospital of Oakland was because my dad actually used to work for a couple years back an organization called Beyond Emancipation, and it's a nonprofit organization that would take in teenagers that had gotten into kind of a lot of trouble. It was in Oakland, so less economically fortunate the area, and it would take in teenagers that were less fortunate and didn't and got themselves into trouble, and it would kind of help them get into jobs and help them get on the right track. And he would tell me stories about some of the kids that he would come across. And instead of saying that they were bad kids and everything, he used to tell me that that was how they were raised, and they were raised to think that all this crime and everything was okay, and it was the only path that they knew. And just the compassion really inspired me. And since I grew up fortunate enough to have good morals and stay on the right track, I thought it would be great to share my knowledge and everything and help other people that are less fortunate. And since Children's Hospital is in a less economically fortunate area of Oakland, I thought that would be a really great way to help in that way. Also, Children's Hospital has an incredible volunteer program. They have over 1,000 volunteers who speak up to over 60 languages, which I thought was really cool. It was really easy to volunteer. You just have to go to an orientation, and then you can start. Volunteering in the emergency department was a little more involved. I had to get a certain amount of hours, but I had already acquired that because I was already volunteering there. Also, I love children. I love working with children. I have a huge family. I have a lot of cousins, and we have family parties all the time. And whether you're part of my family or not, if you come to one of our family parties, you'll always have like a little kid under it at some point in the party because we have so many babies in my family. So I really, really love working with kids, and I think I'm really good at working with kids. I didn't exactly plan to work in pediatrics in the beginning. I just did this because I thought it would be fun to work with kids, but you'll learn later on that I learned that I was actually turned out to be really good at working as a job with children. And goals. So goals were kind of shaky in the beginning because I made them really concrete at first. I made them like, holding is when we get a lot of little infants and children, so when we have to do an injection, they tend to move a lot, and holding is when a volunteer or another nurse holds down their arms so they don't move, so the injection can go in the vein. One of my goals was to hold, and I did that within the first 2 weeks, so that was over with. Another one of my goals was to learn more about diseases and everything and the things that I would see coming in and out of the hospital. But an emergency room, there's a lot of things. So it was really hard to take in everything that was happening. And I also noticed that there were things being repeated a lot. So most of the cases we got were respiratory problems. And it just tended to happen over and over again. And we would only get unique diseases every once in a while. So that was another problem I had with goals. So I decided to make my goals to get more familiar with just working in the environment and trying to get to know the nurses around me because I worked with a lot of nurses in the Children's Hospital emergency department. So my new goals were just to try to take in as much as I could from anywhere because it was just such a chaotic environment. All right. So, a day in the life of an emergency room volunteer at Children's Hospital of Oakland. So, I had quite a few responsibilities. I was a volunteer. So, volunteers usually restock the carts. There are these carts that nurses use, and unlike other departments in the hospital, since it's so chaotic, there are little carts that are stationed at walls, and there are 3 carts, and they're all along this little emergency room, and they're filled with supplies that nurses might need, like off a whim, and they can just grab. And we're responsible for restocking the cart. And we just bring in the supply room, and the supply room is this giant room filled with medical supplies, and I still don't know everything that's in there or where it is. You just kind of gotta look around, and if you spot whatever you need to restock it with, you get it. It usually takes like 45 minutes just to restock it because it's so hard to find everything. But yeah, that's one of our responsibilities. We have to do little odd jobs like restocking the blanket warmers, which are just what they sound like. They look like little refrigerators, but you just put blankets in there to warm up for the kids because they get really cold. Children with their body heat really fast. And we also need to hold, which was one of the things that I explained before, which was my favorite. I loved holding. And sometimes we needed to sit with the patients while the parents were going to get food or something like that. So we just have to do the little odd jobs that the nurses don't really have time to do because the nurses could be used for other things or have more qualified for other things. So yeah, those are my responsibilities. So when I first started, I didn't expect a hospital full of children. Like when you're used to thinking of an emergency room, you're kind of used to thinking chaotic, a bunch of people being pushed around in hospital beds. And it's really hard to imagine those being children. It wasn't chaotic when I first went in there, first of all the patients were in their rooms. There weren't like hospital beds flying around and nurses running around. All the patients were in their rooms, and it was kind of surreal to me that all of them, as you would look in the rooms, they were all children. But yeah, that was kind of a reality check for me. And also, so there were a lot of upsides and downsides, and I will start out by reading a quotation from my journal. And just to preface this quotation, I was in a room and I was supposed to be holding for a 3-day-old baby, and his mother was in the corner crying because the baby was crying so loud. The nurses were trying to get one of the needles in his vein so they could draw blood, and it's really hard to get a child's vein because they're so small. So sometimes like 3 nurses have to try, and they try in both arms, and then they try in the ankles, and if they can't get it in the ankles, they'll try in the arms again. And it's just really horrible for the child. It's just a really bad experience, and they're crying all the time because they don't understand what's going on. So the child was screaming at the top of his lungs, and the mom was in the corner crying. So here's the quote. So I glanced over to the mother in all of the chaos, and she was facing the corner with her face in her hands, weeping for her baby. Overall, it was an incredibly difficult scene to watch. The fact that the first nurse was not able to get in the vein did not improve the situation either. She placed the child's arm back into the blanket swaddle and stepped out. Can you comfort her while you're waiting on the next nurse? The nurse asked me. Of course I would. At least by now the child was softly whining. I leaned over the bundle once again, placing my hand on her stomach while my other hand pet her thin head of hair. She immediately stopped whining and closed her eyes. The mother walked over and wiped her eyes. She looked at the baby, then back at me, and smiled. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I looked back at the baby and smiled too. It was the most accomplished I'd ever felt in my entire life. So that was a really good example of some of the upsides and downsides. So it's really, really hard to see. I think it's a lot harder to see the adults crying than it is to see the babies crying, because the babies have no idea what's going on, and the adults they know what's going on, and they just feel really helpless for their kid. And so I always thought it was more painful to see the adults cry. But the really good thing about that is that the volunteers are the main ones that appease the children. So while the nurses have to kind of do the dirty work and like inject the baby with needles and everything, the volunteers are kind of there to give them a popsicle when they're done and like talk to them and talk them through it and everything. So that's a really good thing, I think, about being a volunteer. So yeah, and so what I struggled with. You really, really have to be outgoing when you are a volunteer, especially in a hospital, especially in a children's hospital. You really have to get to know people. In regards to staff, it's really, really nice to know all the nurses, because the better you know the nurses, the more they ask you to do as a volunteer, and that's what I want experience. So one of the nurses actually I got to know, and we talked a little while, and now every time I go in and she needs someone to hold for her, she asks me to do it. And usually the nurses ask this man named Reggie. He was actually the man who taught me how to do all this stuff. He's the kind of the main guy. He's kind of the overseer of the volunteers. He's not quite a nurse, but he does all the stuff that volunteers do, and he teaches us how to do things. So when he can't hold somebody or he can't fill the cart because he's occupied, the volunteers do it. So instead of asking Reggie to do these things, she would ask me to do them, which was really, really great. It's a really good just connections to have. Also, it was really nice to find, when I finally realized that I had to find stuff to do to keep occupied, because I would get really, really bored in the beginning. I mean, the emergency rooms aren't always chaotic, and they get chaotic, but they're not always chaotic. And I would tend to, when they weren't chaotic, this is the computer monitor that is in the supply room, so whenever nothing was happening, we'd just go in the supply room and kind of hang out. And an interesting thing to do would be to look at the computer monitor, and these are the names of all the people that are currently in the ER, so they're all checked in. And then right here is a list of why they're in the ER. So sometimes it would be like, here's a lip laceration, respiratory distress, which is a really big one. There's a lot of respiratory distress. And there's like back pain and everything. And occasionally I would see a really complicated word, like a disease, and I'd look it up. And I just do that to occupy myself. But the names don't usually change very often. So I can only occupy myself for so long. So I really had to find stuff to do. And after the supply cart was all filled, after all the blanket warmers were all taken care of, I eventually learned that if I go out of the supply room and walk around the emergency room for about 5 minutes, someone would ask me to do something. And that was really, really helpful to find out. If you just go and like put yourself out there, you'll find something to do. It was really helpful to learn that. It also came in handy at work, because I work at a cafe in Berkeley. And I would get really bored at work when we would have slow days. So I tried to use the same idea and keep myself occupied. So I would go, on the slow days, I would go clean the tables and sweep and do all this kind of stuff. And now my managers love me because I do all that. But yeah, it really, really helps even outside of the emergency room. And also, I can totally see how in a hospital environment, finding stuff to do would obviously be easier if you're a nurse, but it's definitely better when you try and keep yourself occupied. And you learn a lot more. Also, trying new things. It's definitely important when especially when you're starting out, to learn to get comfortable trying new things, because I found that once I did something for the first time, it was a lot easier to keep doing it. For example, the first time I ever held without Reggie, because in the beginning, Reggie would always stand there with me and tell me what to do and everything. So the first time I ever had to hold without Reggie, it was a little scary, but the nurses were really, really nice. Again, we have really great nurses at Children's Hospital. First time I held without Reggie, it was scary, but I did it, and it got really easy to hold without him from then on. So I just had to push myself to do it, and I was fine. And also, actually last week when I went, there was a kid who had fractured his tibia, which is a bone in your calf, and it was a really bad fracture. They actually showed me the x-ray, it was really bad. And Reggie was supposed to hold for his cast. His cast was going to go from his upper thigh to his foot, and he told me to come in and watch. So we both went in the room when the kid was getting ready, and they were sedating the kid so he wouldn't feel anything. And Reggie, one of the doctors called Reggie out to go talk to him. But the doctors were ready to wrap the kid's leg in the cast already, so they closed the door, and I was in there, and they thought I was going to do it. And it was a little bit scary because I had never held for a fracture so severe before, but I did it because they asked me to, and it was great. Like, I wish I would have just volunteered in the first place. So yeah, it really taught me to get comfortable with trying new things. Yeah. All right. I learned? I learned about working in a hospital. I learned quite a lot about working in a hospital, which is my goal. I learned that you really have to get to know everyone. The connections are your main thing working in a hospital. Among the nurses at Children's Hospital, there was a really, really great sense of community. Everybody knew each other. Some of them probably went to school together, but they had a really, really great sense of community. And I'm really happy that I'm starting to become part of that because I'm learning their names and everything. So that was really cool for me. And also get to know the doctors and everything because, I mean, if I ever need like a letter of recommendation, I have like 10 people there that I can have write a letter of rec for me, which is really great. But yeah, it's definitely worth learning. And the more I got to know things from people, the more I got to do, the more I learned about things in the hospital. So that definitely helped me. Alright, working with adults and working with children. I had to work with both a lot because we had not only the children, we had the parents too. The parents tended to be pretty tough to work with. They, of course, most of them had been waiting in the emergency room for upwards of 4 hours. The normal time from waiting room to release in an emergency room at Children's Hospital, I believe is 6 hours. So usually they're there all day, and there are actually no windows in the emergency room. So when they get to the emergency room, they're usually there when it's daylight, and it tends to stress them out when they know it's nighttime already, and that's why they do that. But yeah, so they tend to get really impatient. I once brought a kid up, this is actually in my journal, I once brought a kid up to X-ray, and when we bring patients up to X-ray, we bring them parents too, and usually they have a 20-minute wait. And this time we had a lot of kids that had gotten fractured. So they had 40 minutes to wait, and the parents were just railing me because I was the one bringing them, and I couldn't do anything, of course. And I had to sit with them the whole time. So it gets hard, but actually during orientation, the emergency room orientation, they teach you how to deal with angry people because there are quite a few angry people, and they just tell you to remain calm and just keep telling them that you're doing everything you can to make their way easier, because that's what we're doing. It's just, there's so many people that come in that it's really hard to combat everybody. So yeah, so I learned that I prefer to work with children because, first of all, they don't get as impatient, and when they do get impatient, they're extremely easy to appease. We have popsicles in the supply room, we have popsicles, we have crackers, we have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, we have so many things that keep them totally occupied, and we have stuffed animals. So I find that working with children is a little easier, for me at least. Also, I find that working with children is easier because children don't know what they're talking about and don't think they know what they're talking about, while adults usually think they know what they're talking about and don't. So it's a lot easier to work with someone who will completely trust you. So, for example, you can tell the child that the stitches will only take 10 more seconds, and even though you know they'll take 5 more minutes, and they'll believe you. Which, it sounds wrong, but it works. It's a really good way to do things. Whereas adults know that it's going to take 10 more minutes. It just makes it a lot easier when the kids doesn't know. But they're also they smile a lot. I don't know. Working with kids, to put it simply, it's just easier. It makes me happy when the kids are happy, and it's really easy to make them happy. So I really, really like that about working with kids. So plans for the future. So I took quite a big turn in my career path in this experience. It actually completely changed what my future is going to look like, which is pretty big. I chose to pursue a career in pediatric nursing rather than surgery. So that completely changed everything. My original plan was to go to UC for 4 years and get a major in biology, and then go to med school and be a surgeon, which would have been really cool too. But I noticed that pediatric nursing would be a really great path for me because I see so many pediatric nurses every single day, and they have so much patient interaction, so much more than doctors. I see a lot of doctors and a lot of nurses. I tend to see more nurses because the doctors only come in when the serious procedures need to be done. But the doctors don't really talk to the patients. They kind of just go in, do it, and come out. And they don't even, this isn't all the doctors, but most of the doctors I see don't even smile when they're doing it. The nurses are usually the ones that are trying to get the child to stop crying or something. The nurses are always talking to the child, and they're always interacting and everything. And they always seem like happy. Well, they don't always seem happy. They're stressed out sometimes. But they always have a smile on their face when they're near the child, which is great. I think that would be a much better fit for me. So yeah, now I am going to a community college for 2 years and then transferring hopefully into the USF nursing program. So that was a pretty big decision. It was a really big decision. But I'm really happy with it and I'm really excited to pursue nursing. I also, since I'm saving so much money going to community college, I decided to take an EMT certification class, and being an EMT is a technician that goes into ambulances and sort of helps out with transferring the patient to a hospital. And it's a really accelerated 2-week class, so I'm hoping I'm going to get a job being an EMT while I'm at my community college. I would also like, once I get my nursing degree, to travel abroad to the less economically advantageous countries. So hopefully my main goal would be for like Ecuador, because I speak Spanish, which comes in handy a lot. So like Ecuador and Peru, I have a program that I wanted to go through it in, and use my nursing skills to contribute to these organizations and everything. So yeah, hopefully I have a pretty promising career in pediatric nursing. I'm really excited to pursue it. So thank you for your guys' attention and evaluating my presentation. I have a few thank yous that I would like to point out. So Mr. G'day has been my wise mentor, and he's been amazing because I have not been the best mentee, I must say. I have been very busy this year, but I really, really want to thank you for all you've done. Mr. Poling, thank you so much for teaching WISE. It has been my favorite class for sure. We've really gotten close, even though we didn't even spend second semester together. Reggie, thank you to Reggie. His name's Reginald Wright. I knew him as Reggie until like last week. I didn't even know his last name. But yeah, he helped me so much. He was the one that got me to hold and everything. I would have been courageous enough to do it without him. Thank you to my mom, Eva Sloan, and my dad, who's not here, Jeffrey Sloan, and also Susan Martinez, who is the volunteer coordinator at Children's Hospital Oakland. She was the one. It was a little tough to get the position because she's such a busy woman, but she ended up pulling the strings and getting it for me, so she was really, really nice. So those are all my thank yous. Thank you for watching my presentation.
All right, we certainly have time for questions. We'll have.
Do you think you'll continue working over summer?
Yes, I'm gonna try and continue working throughout my years at community college as well.
So I was surprised at how, I guess maybe it wasn't easy, but that as the leader, it seemed very easy to get this volunteer position and have such close access to patients, very quickly. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the process? I know that it was actually probably more than you talked about, but it just seems to me as a leader.
It is pretty easy. People just, I think it's more of people just don't, like, people are scared of what they're going to see in the ER, so they don't go the extra mile to do it. But you just have to go to another orientation, and they only have emergency room orientations when there's high enough demand. So they only have about 3 times a year. And I got really lucky, and I emailed her like 2 weeks before they were planning on doing one. So it's timing a little bit, but you can do it when you're under 18. Anybody can do it.
And what are the other, I mean, that's it, there's the age.
You have to, there's no
background
age.
check, what is there?
It's every requirement that there is for you to be a volunteer in any department.
Right.
So you have to have your vaccinations, you have to be, I believe, I don't think there's an age limit, because I started when I was 16. It only requires, I believe, 100 hours of floor volunteering, and I didn't have floor volunteering experience. I had, floor is when you have direct patient interaction. I had the paperwork that I was doing, but they still let me do it anyway, because I did a 4-hour floor volunteering thing in the emergency room, waiting room. So she made an exception, Susan Martinez, because she's really nice. And she let me do that, but that's basically the only requirement. Anybody can do it. People just don't tend to do it because of all the orientations you have to sign up for. But if you email Susan Martinez, she'll tell you everything you need to know about volunteering.
Well, it sounds like you kind of took your uncle's advice, right? And just
Oh yeah,
did whatever it took.
yeah.
It's admirable. But I do have a question. Had you thought about, you have all these strategies for the kids to, allay fears and to distract and stuff. I wondered if the same strategies, or not same, but a strategy for the parents has been thought about at the hospital. How to keep people kind of in a better place after 4 or 5 hours.
Well, basically all you can do is kill them with kindness. Like, we can't really give them a popsicle and make them happy. So you just have to kind of be really, really nice to them. A lot of times they're not the most respectful, and you just have to deal with it. But the only strategy is just to be really nice.
I've been in hospitals where, where they know there's going to be time or anxiety, and they have music, and they have tea, and they have all these other things. I've sat with my children in that emergency room. I know how.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of the patient sorts, but I can imagine.
Yeah.
I just can't help it when
Yeah. Ours is definitely more centered toward pleasing the child.
Yeah. Very child.
Yeah.
So you said that you really like to make kids happy and be around kids that are happy, and I'm wondering, there's so many places you could work where kids are generally always happy, as opposed to a hospital where they rarely are. Can you elaborate on do you like making the kids happy? Because that's what you have to do. And what is it about going from being distraught or frightened or whatever? What did you learn about, why you like that process of getting them from point A to point B?
Well, doing it at Children's Hospital, you get to learn, because I really, really enjoy learning about this medical stuff, so it's kind of combining the stuff that I really like to do with, working with children was completely unrelated to the whole career perspective that I had. I just thought that would be fun, but to be able to do them together and kind of connect them together, I thought would be a really great opportunity for me, because it is the process of making them feel better when they are unhappy. It just feels really good when your child smiles after they've been screaming for the past 3 hours. But just the combination of both put together, I just think is a really good fit for me.
So I've got a couple sort of medical-ish things. One, not so much respiratory distress, I guess.
Asthma is it's a lot more common than people think it is, because a lot of people have it and don't know they have it. So asthma is really common. A lot of the times when they put respiratory distress, it is asthma. They just don't put asthma because it's not diagnosed. But a lot of children choke on things, and that's respiratory distress. Respiratory distress is it's just a really general term for a child having a hard time breathing, and obviously that happens a lot. So respiratory distress could be undiagnosed pneumonia, undiagnosed asthma, and it could be a number of things, or just a cough. So that's why it's so common.
That's another question. So you, just last week, I guess, you met Adrienne Horton, who's a nurse in pediatrics. And you're mentioning that you love making the kids happy, and you love the sort of there's medical stuff to learn. She's already at the point where she's kind of getting bored because there's not any more medical stuff to learn. Do you anticipate, getting bored at a certain point?
Well, I think working in pediatrics, it would give me something to keep occupied. So even when I do know Even when I get bored with the information, working with kids would make me less bored. I also plan to get a master's in nursing once I get bored with my BSN and just being a nurse, maybe becoming a nurse manager, and maybe going to school even longer and becoming a physician's assistant. So that's why I like nursing a lot, because it was really flexible. And I can kind of go farther if I get bored with whatever I'm doing. Or I want more to be able to consent to more for patients and everything. So I thought that was a good fit too.
Two questions. One was, in your studies of science here, was there ever a light bulb that went off where like, oh my gosh, something I learned in biology or physiology or whatever else, I just saw that in practice. Was there ever any moment where the academic learning?
That happens every single day.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, the tibial fracture. So they said it was a spiral tibial fracture, and I totally knew what that meant, and I just felt really good about it. And when I saw a picture, I was like, yeah, I saw those pictures in physio, something that looked just like that. That was really cool. What a spinal tap, I learned what a spinal tap is, and a spinal tap is, I learned this in physio, but I got to see one. Is when the nurses will take a needle and stick it in the lower part of the lumbar vertebrae and in between two vertebrae to get into the cerebral spinal fluid. And they'll take them out to test for meningitis. And I learned what meningitis was in physiology, and I learned that a spinal tap could do that and everything. And it was cool to see all this stuff actually happening. And the diseases that they would test for when they would do blood tests, I learned about in physio. And we also learned the concentration of, and I won't get too into it, but red blood cells and white blood cells and everything. And I got to see some of the paperwork of the results of some of the tests, which I wasn't able to bring here or anything. It was really hard to get stuff to bring here. But yeah, I saw a lot of it in physio, which was really cool.
Thank you.
Were there other departments in the children's hospital that you were interested in? Did they have an oncology floor?
Yeah, they actually had an ICN, which is an intensive care nursery. And so basically, this isn't the most engaging academically, but you get to hold newborns. Basically, that's all you do. You get to hold newborns, and I really wanted to do that. So I'm actually still trying to get into that department. But yeah, the ICN would be really cool.
What was the most unique situation for yourself while you were there?
Probably the spinal tap. That was kind of the most interesting. I can't hold for spinal tap, so I watched Reggie do it. But I had never seen anything like it. So they basically just stick the needle inside the lower back of the baby. You basically have to lay the baby on its side and fold it. It sounds really horrible, but kind of fold the body in half a little bit so it's easier to get to the specific place. And they stick the needle in, and usually in the beginning blood comes out because they don't always get it right the first time. It takes a really, really long time to take a lot of practice to get it right every time. So usually the doctors didn't get it the first time. And when they finally did get it right, it would just be clear, thick fluid that would come out. And it was just really interesting because whenever you see a needle stuck in someone, you used to seeing blood come out. So I just thought seeing cerebrospinal fluid for the first time, I don't know, I thought it was really cool.
So your interest in medicine, did you always have it, or was it a class that you took here?
Freshman biology actually got me interested in medicine. Yeah, which is weird because a lot of people don't learn a lot of medicine. I mean, a lot of people don't tend to consider freshman biology. It's a required class. Yeah. So I really loved it, and I ended up taking AP biology. It was amazing. AP biology is definitely my favorite class. So freshman biology got me totally hooked on medicine. I really loved it.
We got time for one more. Someone asked one more.
Personally, I don't like seeing lots of blood. Did that ever bother you, or did you end up seeing lots of blood?
Yeah, I saw a lot of blood. Well, you had to see people get needles injected in their veins and then blood come out. So yeah, I did see a lot of blood. I've almost gotten splashed with blood a lot, which probably isn't good. But yeah, because when they pull the needle out, it bleeds a lot, and then you have to put cotton swabs on it. And usually, I just see the blood with the injections. I have seen lacerations, so I've seen like cuts and everything, really bad lacerations. I've seen lip lacerations, and scalp lacerations, and there's always gushing blood. So you kind of have to have a thick skin for seeing blood to work in it. That's probably another reason why children or people my age don't tend to go the extra mile to volunteer in the emergency department because they think they're going to see that much blood. And you do, but you get used to it. You definitely get used to it. I used to be really, really sensitive to seeing needles go into my own arm, but I see it so much now that last time I had to get a vaccine, I totally was desensitized to it, and it doesn't even faze me anymore.
All right, thank you again, Emily. So we'll give Emily a chance to catch your breath.